Hi, I'm Chad from Chad DIY, and today's project is a desk organizer. So let's get started. I'll start by cutting out 26-inch strips on the table saw. The maple strips are going to be a 1/2 inch wide, and the oak strips will be 1 inch wide, and the center one will be 1.5 inches wide. I'm actually cutting everything a little wider than it needs to be because I'll run everything through the planer at the end. Now I'll run all the strips through the planer to make sure they're the perfect width. Next I'll start gluing everything together. Making sure I'm using plenty of wood glue so everything adheres properly. I'm just gluing one strip at a time and then I'll clamp everything together. I want to see some glue oozing out to make sure there's full coverage. Now I can start clamping everything together. I'm just using a few clamps at each end, and then I'll put a few clamps in the middle as well, trying to make sure everything is flush. As I wait for the glue to dry, I'll work on the side pieces of the organizer. I'm just cutting this oak board in half with a bandsaw. I'm going to run those boards through the planer to smooth them out from the bandsaw cuts. I let the glue dry overnight, and now I can remove all the clamps. I'm just taking a chisel here to remove all the excess glue before I run it through the planer. I also want to use a sander just to get all the excess glue off completely. Now I will run the whole board through the planer on both sides to make sure everything is nice and smooth. Now I can mark out where I want the cuts to be. The length of the organizer is going to be 14 inches. I'll make that cut, and I'll also make a 7-inch cut for the top part of the organizer. I'm using a 2-inch fastener bit to make the holes where the pens and the markers will go in the organizer. On the bottom of the organizer, I only want to make the holes halfway through the wood. I used a marker to mark the fastener bit so I knew how deep to drill the holes. Next, I'll use a roundover bit on the router to smooth out all the openings of the holes. The spindle sander makes sure everything is ready to stain. Now I can start putting everything together. I'm using a series of wood glue, brad nails, and also some wood screws to attach everything. I'm just taking my time so everything matches up perfectly. Next, I'll cut out the 1/2 inch metal tubing for the project. I'm using E6000 glue to attach the metal tubing to the wood. Once I have the metal tubing in place, I can start working on the other end of the organizer. To attach this part, I'm using wood glue, and then I'll use 3 wood screws on the bottom of the organizer. I countersunk the holes so the wood screws wouldn't stick out the bottom. Next, I'll cut the side pieces of the organizer to length. To attach this piece, I'm just using wood glue and a few brad nails. I'll cut the 2 slot pieces at a 45-degree angle. To attach these pieces, I'm just using wood glue. I also made 1-inch spacers to make sure the pieces were perfectly straight. I'll just use a quick clamp to hold everything in place while the glue dries. Next, I'll start staining the piece. I'm using a red mahogany stain, which I will just brush on and then wipe off with a rag. I'll just take my time to make sure the stain gets in all the corners. After the stain dries, I'll add a coat of spray lacquer to finish everything off. So everything's dry now, so here's the final project. I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. The biggest thing is when I use the red mahogany stain, it's really hard to see the different types of wood now. Before it was a lot more obvious with the oak and the maple. But after I stained it, it kind of all blended together. I think if I had to do it over again, I might have just left it natural and just used the spray lacquer over the natural wood. But anyways, I'm pretty pleased overall. So I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, I hope you hit that like button. And as always, please subscribe. Thanks.